Now we're ready to take you on a series of 7 different segments. And we're going to explain in some depth how we came to create the cogwheels of brain health. These we call the 6 essential cogwheels of brain health. And Michael, do you remember when we had just 3? We didn't even call them cogwheels.
I know, we were looking at pillars and
the first ones I used was a milking stool. I said that there are 3 essential things you have to have. I called it a milking stool because people understood that if you have a milking stool that has 3 legs on it, the legs can be a little bit wobbly and as long or shorter than the other, but they'll hold firm. 2 of them, it'll tip over.
Right.
The science at that time, I thought, had 3 things you have to have. The rest is good to have. And then all of a sudden, science said that there's 4, and then there's 5. And when you and I started thinking, how do we describe this? I don't know if it was you or me or one of those ideas of having cognitive wheels that could somehow drive each other. So where did that take us from then?
Well, part of the way I think about it is that there's so much information. I mean, we're gathering information all the time, and you've talked about this being the golden age of neuroscience.
Right.
Neuroscience is in its infancy, but it's really, research is just flooding out. So part of it is the process of how do we organize all of this material.
And organize it so we understand it, and then organize it so that we can speak plain English and have others understand it.
Right. And it's actually the way the brain operates. We've talked about this a little bit, is that you've got to, we're looking for patterns. The brain is always looking for patterns in this convergence. So what we're trying to do with the cogwheels, among other things, I think, is give ourselves buckets almost, you know, that we can put this type of information in because it amplifies that. But the cogwheels, I think it was you that hit on that, when we finally did, we realized, oh, this is really important because it gives that idea of a mechanism that is interactive
and reliant upon the others to move in a certain way. And we use cogwheels both because it's cognitive and it sounds like it's something we could pull together, but a fine watch would have cogwheels that are essential, and that if one of those cogwheels was to get weak, it's still going to tick and run. But a fine watch that has a cogwheel that stops or loses too many of its teeth, at that point, it doesn't matter how strong the other 5 cogwheels are, your brain will have issues until you repair that one cogwheel. And when we got to 5, I remember when we added social to the mix, and now we call it social engagement. It was after some studies in 2006 came out that showed that socialization is so important. We'll get to that one. And then we added a couple more. We now have 6. We may have 5 next year if something happens in science that makes one of the cogwheels less essential. I doubt it. But we also may see science evolve to need to put in a 7th cogwheel. We never want to say that other parts of the watch aren't important. But if it's just basic brain health that'll keep you healthy for the rest of your life, it's those 6.
Yeah. One of the things we have talked about is, do we make health maintenance a separate cogwheel?
Okay.
And we've decided actually not to use that as a separate cogwheel, I think, because so much of that, the activity in the other cogwheels is related to it. So in a sense, health maintenance is a basic part of what's going on, and it permeates each of the other.
I think we could go deeper and say every cogwheel has a maintenance program, and that you have to maintain every cogwheel. But I understand what you're saying.
Yeah, and as we've worked with the cogwheels, 3 different aspects about it become increasingly clear, and I think increasingly important. One is this concept that it's combinatorial.
Okay.
And that's
use another term for combinatorial.
They're multifactorial. You need to combine them.
Multifactorial. See,
it doesn't get
Michael
any simpler.
Can't get away from those. So if it's combining actions, and you use the word combinatorial, and I had to call you back and say, what is that word? But it's now in the literature, and it's a wonderful word, or multifactorial. The factors that cause you to either succeed or fail. once you know that you have those interactions, you have to be understanding these things in combination. We're going to keep using combinatorial because that really does have a meaning in your brain's future and everyone's brain future to know that it isn't just one thing.
Yeah. And in the book, we do define it, what we mean by it, but we keep finding, instances where
Exactly.
you say, look at this research. What they're saying
And look at
is
what
it's
an impact,
combinatorial.
what an impact this cogwheel has on that cogwheel. You didn't think they were related until a scientist connects the dots.
Yep. Second really important point about the cogwheels, particularly when we're translating the cogwheels into personal use,
Right.
and developing personal strategies, is that they are personal. Each person's brain is different, so their cogwheels are going to be working in a different
Yeah.
way. So you have to address them in a different way. They will be compromised.
And that's been a challenge for both scientists and for therapists and for people in the field of gerontology, is that brain science is complicated enough. And we like
Right.
to say it ain't rocket science. It's a lot harder than rocket science. But if we know it has to be tailored, it has to be customized, we can give the basic framework. We know the essential things to do. But from that point on, there has to be a real concerted effort to get a plan. A strategy is what we've been calling it. And that personalization, which is the second of those factors that really are overarching,
Right.
that's one that can't be underestimated.
Yep. And then the third one is sustainability. When we work on these cogwheels, when we develop brain health strategies, it involves behavior change, lifestyle changes, you're looking at risk factors, you're looking at protective factors. None of these are sort of a magic bullet that we can tell you, just do this and overnight, your problems will be solved. They take work, and you have to keep, if you've changed a habit and gotten rid of a bad habit and replaced it with a healthy, brain healthy habit, you got to keep doing that
Yeah.
for the rest of your life.
And I remember years ago when we would see a good study coming in, and then we would read critics who would say, yes, that's true, but nobody will do it. Yes, that's true also, but nobody will do that. And all these different individual things that you can do to help your brain. But the naysayers were saying, but nobody would do it. And then in the last few years, and we cover this in another segment, the books and the research on willpower, on power of habit, on how the brain works when it can structurally, architecturally change shape over time by the determination of people to say, I see a longer term goal. And that's the sustainability challenge you and I saw earlier. And in the model of saying that sustainability has to be there, if it isn't going to be sustainable, then you need to rethink the plan and figure out how are you going to make it sustainable.
Yeah, it's a really important point for people who, we've been calling ourselves recently brain health strategists because of this important, it's not enough just to know the science, it's not enough to communicate the science. Once people know what to do, like you say, it isn't always that easy. So there's this whole other component of being a strategist, of helping people plan individualized strategies that are going to really help them take action that they can sustain over time.
Exactly. So in the next